Hello, everyone. It is May 13th. This is the fourth episode of the Racing is Life podcast, a part of the Rabbit Slinger Media Group. So, in today's episode, have a few things on the docket, so to speak. And first off, the first major topic is the talks that are increasing about the 2022 Cup Series schedule. This is like my first episode where I'm talking in the present day about like things that are happening about NASCAR today in 2021 and going back through like some of the recent history. So I'll be talking about maybe some changes, that we may be seeing with the 2022 schedule and go over the recent history. And what I mean by recent history is I'll be mentioning some of the late 90s, and 2000 schedules for the Busch Series and the trucks, and then new tracks that have come into NASCAR since the mid 90s to the present day, and just talk about some different ways how I think NASCAR is going to head, just some general opinions I have. And there is one track in particular there's two tracks that are getting a lot of mentions about trying to get back on the NASCAR schedule. Nashville Fairgrounds, which if you pay attention to the NASCAR YouTube community, they're definitely talking about. There was just a council meeting with a fair group that's in charge of the fairgrounds. And yeah, we'll talk about some of the people that were speaking about whether they were for or against the fairgrounds coming back. North Wilkesboro is picking up some steam. So, like I said, it's going to be predominantly about the schedule for the Cup Series and just some history about where the schedule used to be at. Might talk about Junior Motorsports going Cup Series racing next year, and if that's possible at all. And yeah, I made a comment about, just a thought I had, and well, let's just say one commenter didn't exactly agree with me on it. So I'll give you that thought after that, and then we'll have a little bit of today in racing history and yesterday in history. So with that, let's get started. Before I actually get started, if you want to subscribe to this channel, please hit the subscribe button. I have my Facebook group. I'm trying to get numbers up for both of these, and right now, going into this episode, I was at 9 subscribers for YouTube. I want to get that to 10, and of course, 20, yada, yada, yada. But I just want to have 10, so I will post a little video about, I'll give you a hint. The video is Varsity Blues. But, yeah, let's just get started. So the reason I thought about this episode, this topic with the schedule is, like I said, there seems to be steam picking up about the schedule because obviously, we're in the middle of May now, and the schedule is usually announced in the summertime. So being that we're on the cusp of summer, there's some talks about, what's the schedule going to be like? Well, and of course, with recent events, with NASCAR, they've had to change, some things around, and it has led to some new potential opportunities. Well, the first article that caught my mind on this it's with the from the Sports Business Journal, and it's an article titled NASCAR, a quick study by Adam Stern. So Adam Stern, a very well-known name for NASCAR journalism. And in this article, it talks about Ben Kennedy, who is a member of the France family. Wasn't that long ago, Ben was racing in the truck series predominantly, has his K&N slash Menards East series team, but he's kind of on the up and up of moving up in NASCAR and just also happens to be 29 as well. But yeah, the article goes over multiple different things like how Kennedy has had to get more of a workload due to the pandemic. And let's see, anything that, yeah, and just how he's like taking a lot of stuff on and could just potentially be the future leader of NASCAR. But the main reason I'm into this article, decent article if you want to give it a check, you might have to subscribe via email. It's free, but it's one of those lovely websites that you have to subscribe to. But the main purpose of the article is that I got out of it, and hence why I'm talking about it today, is potential new races on the NASCAR calendar. And it mentions in the article that there is a mentioning of a renaissance, I'm quoting the article here, a renaissance for street courses in the U.S. Well, NASCAR is not known for street courses, so this is something that's going to be brand new to NASCAR fans. Obviously, street courses are known for in Formula One, IndyCar, open wheel. What was it? Not that long ago, IndyCar was running at St. Petersburg. So, just my thoughts off the top of my head. Why not? Don't overload it on the schedule. I know there's a couple areas that they're talking about having a street course at. I know Chicago, the former home of Chicagoland Speedway, is frequently mentioned. And then in this article, they've talked about Denver, the Pacific Northwest, so possibly Portland or Seattle. Any one of those would be, cool. I mean, I know Chicago gets a lot of mentions, but, whether it be Denver or somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, those are areas that aren't, really serve as much with NASCAR. And from what I'm hearing from other people, that the Pacific Northwest has a really big auto racing following. So, but what else did the article mention? How there's not much of a presence, like I've just previously stated a few seconds ago, about the lack of a presence in the Pacific Northwest and the Midwest. But yeah, give the article a look. It's geez, I gotta get on a roll here. But yeah, I think 2021 originally was supposed to be, prior to the pandemic, we were supposed to have a newer NASCAR schedule now, and we do in part, but prior to the pandemic, there was talk of 2021 being a whole new racing schedule. Some things very similar, but some things very different. In 2021, let me just look at the schedule. Obviously, some tracks have shifted around. Some tracks have lost a date. We have just had about a month and a half ago the Bristol Dirt Race. Circuit of the Americas, the road course that was first built for Formula One, is coming up on May 23rd for the Cup Series. Racing at Nashville Superspeedway, and then we're adding, in addition to Watkins Glen and Sonoma, the two road courses NASCAR is known for, you have other tracks like Circuit of the Americas. Road America is on July 4th. for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, all of the series are racing on the road course now. And of course, you have the Roval, but road course racing is seeming to pick up some steam, and that seems to be what the fans want. Today, I mean, this year, well, it seems to be a new thing because, as I will mention here in a little bit, back when I was growing up, there was an influx of predominantly when you're getting a new track on the schedule that's, being built and then be putting on the NASCAR schedule in some form or another. More often than not, it was a mile and a half. So being that, I was starting to become a NASCAR fan in the mid to late 90s, you got a little bit of an influx. The schedule increased from like 28, 29 races up into the 30 to 32, and now we've been predominantly, for the most part, been stuck at 36. And as I will be mentioning just in a moment here, a big shift change occurred in 2001. And while it was not complete, in 2001, in the years that followed up to the mid 2000s, so let's just say 5-6 years following, you started to see the last remnants of the old school NASCAR schedule, so to speak, go off the NASCAR schedule. So one of the first things I did was as a fan, starting to get into NASCAR in the mid to late 90s, when it comes to the Busch Series back in the day and the Truck Series, their schedule back in those just over 20 years ago, while they shared a decent portion of their schedule with the Cup Series at the time, they were more independent than they are now. I think the schedules, while it's not a complete carbon copy of this Cup schedule, it's basically, in large part, let's just say it's 75% a carbon copy of the Cup schedule. So I remember watching races in 1998, 1999, 2000. So I thought, okay, look at the schedule and, see what tracks that were on the schedule that are no longer on the schedule. And this predominantly comes with the 2001 schedule. So 2000, a lot of these tracks I'm going to mention now were off the schedule in 2001. So with the Busch Series, you had the Nashville Fairgrounds. Yeah, we'll be talking about them in a little bit. Short tracks such as Hickory Speedway, Myrtle Beach, South Boston. Not too far from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is Indianapolis Raceway Park, also known as O'Reilly Raceway Park. That's what it's called now. In Pennsylvania, on the east side, up in Nazareth, home of the Andretti's, you had Nazareth Speedway. You have out in Colorado, you have Pikes Peak Raceway. Up in Wisconsin, you have the Milwaukee Mile. And yeah, on the Busch Series, those were the tracks that didn't have a Cup Series race, but they would either have either a truck race or a Busch Series race, or both. And these are all predominantly short tracks, whether they're a half mile or a 3/4 mile, they're all predominantly under a mile. And then looking at the Truck Series schedule, you had the Walt Disney World Raceway near Disney World. You had Portland Speedway, Evergreen Speedway, I-70, Flemington Speedway, a road course in Heartland Park, Topeka, Louisville Speedway, Memphis, Louisville Speedway, and Mesa Moran. So this is what if you're listening to the NASCAR community, um, especially, I mean, it's probably expands to all ages. My age. I'm mentioning this partly because I want to see a return to this, but it's definitely common in older fans. Is around this time we got away from short track racing, and we predominantly the new tracks that came about in the mid 90s, early to mid 2000s for the most part were mile and a halves. As I mentioned before, it seems like road courses are kind of getting popular now amongst NASCAR fans. Well, I was too young to remember, but maybe did we want D-shaped, cookie-shaped ovals in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s? Because I got to get on a roll here, guys. But in new tracks that have come about, you have the Homestead Miami Speedway in 1995, which was a mile and a half track, and that got reconfigured. And that got on the Cup schedule in the late 90s. Then in 1996/1997, the first Cup race at Texas Motor Speedway was in 1997. And then you also had Auto Club Speedway. That was a 2-mile track up in over in Auto Club. And then Texas is a mile and a half. And then a track that is kind of forgot about is the Chicago Motor Speedway, which appeared on the at least the truck schedule from what I was looking at for a couple years. It was a 1 mile. 2000, you get Kentucky, which is a mile and a half track. And then 2001, and this is the last two tracks that were built and debuted in the Cup Series, were the Chicagoland and Kansas Speedways, which are both mile and a half tracks. So both those tracks were the last new tracks that were built that were put on the Cup Series schedule. Anything else that has been added to the Cup schedule has already been a track prior, whether it's been for 30 years, 10 years. Circuit of the Americas was completed in the early 2010s. And then what else do we have? Then you have Mansfield, that was built in the early to mid 2000s. That's just under half a mile. Iowa Speedway, their first race was in 2006. So I don't know how to count. And then, like I said, Circuit of the Americas was 2012. And then they're debuting with NASCAR this year. So a lot of these tracks that have been built recently are mile and a halves. And that, if you're talking to NASCAR fans now, they're just like, I'm trying to figure out how to say this the best way that I can, but if they were to rank every single NASCAR race, odds are pretty good. A lot of the tracks at the bottom are going to be mile and a halves. The racing's just not there. Your short track racing, your restrictor plate racing. We'll see how, with the influx of road courses on the schedule, how that's going to play over. Because, I mean, if that plays over really well at tracks like Circuit of the Americas, Road America, and such, we might be seeing maybe an influx of road courses on the schedule if that's what the fans want. As far as I'm concerned, I don't mind road course racing when it comes to the NASCAR Heat video games. That's all I can win at in the short tracks. But I digress. And I want to see a return to short tracks. And now I'm sure the comments are going to be made, as they frequently are. These tracks aren't up to capacity in some cases, and they will have lower crowd counts. Well, I'm sorry, but if for some way I can, watch a race before I go to work, whether it be for the truck series or the Xfinity series, you're seeing a bunch of seats. Okay, so yeah, they can, at capacity, they can hold a lot more than, say, maybe some of these short tracks like Hickory, South Boston, that may, I don't know what their numbers are, but let's just say it's 25,000. And say Kentucky can hold 75,000, let's say. Don't quote me on the numbers here. But what good are you doing if at Kentucky you can only, out of that 75,000, let's say, if you're only getting 30,000? But if you go to South Boston or Hickory, you can fill those places up, I'm sure. Because off the top of my mind, if I want to go to a NASCAR race, I want to do that here sooner rather than later. Do I want to stay somewhat close to home? Yes. But I would be more willing to go down to North Carolina and go see Hickory, or make my drive a little bit shorter, go to South Boston and Virginia. Milwaukee would be cool, but I don't know, it's hard to see when. Let's continue on going to these 1.5-mile tracks in large part, these 2-mile tracks, once or twice a year. And that's more about the talk of the schedule, is some of these tracks that have 2 dates are going to go down to 1. And I think it makes sense, because it doesn't look good when whatever your capacity is, if you're not even filling it. If you're not filling it for, under normal circumstances. Yes, I understand now with the crowd capacities for some of these races. Yeah, I understand that. So you really can't look at it now, depending on the situation, and be like, oh, well, Zach, hey, this track last week, where did we race last week? Darlington. Darlington's not the best example, but I'm sure Darlington can get some decent crowds still. But let's just say Kansas the week before. Maybe, if they're not filling up that crowd under normal circumstances, why in large part, prior to the schedule starting to switch, why do these places have 2 races if they can't fill either one of them? I think if you combine some of these tracks into one, if they go down from 2 to 1, I think that's going to help, because obviously there's going to be more of a demand because there is less of a quantity. And guess what? It's going to look better on TV. It's going to look better to people potentially looking to invest in NASCAR, whether it be sponsorship for a team, premier partner of NASCAR, whatever it may be. You want to give the best picture possible, whether they're watching on TV or they're at the race. So, I wanted to look a little bit more into potential changes into the Cup schedule. And like I just mentioned here, why do some of these tracks have 2 races? And there seems to be a common agreement amongst a lot of NASCAR fans. If there was a group of 20 NASCAR fans, I'm sure a lot of us would agree of what tracks maybe need to be taken off the schedule or reduced. Matt McLaughlin on frontstretch.com gave his take on this, and this is another article. I was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense to me. I can agree with it. He talks about possibly shortening the schedule to 36-point paying races of what it is now, and then we have a few exhibition races. He wants to shorten that because, we're starting off in February and going into November just prior to Thanksgiving. So he wants to shorten it, which, let's just say, I think he wants to be in the high 20s, So not quite down 10 races, but maybe with the exhibitions, we're getting there with 10 races. But where do we cut, in that case? I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea, but I mean, I'm so used to the 36 race schedule because, growing up, you're not always paying attention to NASCAR, but ever since I've been paying attention to NASCAR in large parts, it's been a 36 race point schedule. But yeah, Matt mentioned, what did I highlight here? He wants to see the final race at Darlington. Okay, I'm sure you could get a great amount of people that could say, okay, that's not a bad idea. With them just racing there this past week, the reviews were not outstanding, but they weren't meh either or bad. So, I mean, it's not a bad idea. I think if you were to talk to some Cup fans about, races you'd like to see the season concluded at, Darlington's one just because of the historical significance it has for NASCAR. I've thought about Daytona. Granted, do you really? I mean, that's a Jekyll and Hyde scenario with Daytona. Yeah, it would be cool, but the way the racing is, that could potentially burn you. And I'm talking about the big one. And if you have any of your Final Four contenders in that rack, or most of them, yeah, there's the potential to get burned on that one. But let me think what else. I mean, I don't know, just maybe ending this series at a bigger track. So I'm so used to Homestead Miami being the final race, and then they have shifted that to Phoenix. And then prior to that, it was Atlanta. Not bad tracks. I'll speak more towards Homestead and Phoenix now. Obviously, Homestead Miami has the bigger sample size. Yeah, recently, with the playoffs, I didn't think Homestead was bad, but Phoenix I haven't seen too much of because when you have a Friday through Tuesday work schedule, kind of prevents you from seeing the final race or predominantly most of the races. Hence why I love 3 p.m. starts. But I lost my train of thought here, but I don't know. I don't know if switching it every year is the solution, but maybe give 3 or 4 years. I think this would be the 3rd or 4th year potentially that we're going to be finishing the season at Phoenix. Just change it up every few years. Just have basically a lottery or something and just be like, hey, doing the lottery, and for the 2022 to 2025 seasons, the Cup Series schedule is going to be raced at Bristol. Something like that, just because, for the longest time we finished the season at Homestead, and no offense, but it's just me. I'd like to see maybe some, just mix things up. So back to McLaughlin's article on Front Stretch, saying that NASCAR has heard its fans. They want more short track racing. I might have been mentioning that on this podcast, but I'm just trying to reread my notes here. Yeah, mentioning how some short tracks, predominantly we view short tracks as under a mile. That's up for interpretation. But Phoenix, Dover, and New Hampshire Speedway, they're on the shorter side, but they're not true short track. And those ones are frequently mentioned as only having one racing date. Yeah, Phoenix it has its moments, but it's never really done that much for me. Dover, a short distance track for me. I think it's 4 or 5 hours I could drive over. And I've thought about it. So that one I want to see Dover on the schedule. I think, concrete track, they're few and far between. So it's, nice to see that. And plus, like I said, I've always liked Dover. New Hampshire, there's been some talk about them taking that off the schedule, and in a reverse from the 90s when North Wilkesboro got taken off the schedule, North Wilkesboro's dates in part were given to New Hampshire. Wouldn't it be weird all these years later that New Hampshire's taken off the schedule in favor of North Wilkesboro? We'll mention them in the Nashville Fairgrounds in a little bit here, but I love the New England area, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine. So that's going to be probably a 12-hour drive, but I love the area up there, so I would consider, if somebody said, hey, I'm giving you free tickets to New Hampshire, I'll make it work. Next up, we have the 2-mile tracks. So like I mentioned before, Auto Club / California Speedway, that's a 2-mile. That's being made into a short track, so we'll wait and see how that happens, because that seems to be in the works now. So that's maybe a couple years away. Michigan, home of the automakers. Do they really need 2 races? Yeah, I just mentioned the automakers, but get more bang for your buck. 1 race. Hopefully you can at least fill it closer to capacity. And I've never really been a big fan of the 2 miles, just because you can get so spread out and the racing's to below average. So I'm not saying get rid of all the 2 miles. It's nice to have a variety, whether it's the short tracks that are between half a mile and say 3/4 mile, 1.25 mile tracks, 1.5 mile. We're obviously going to continue to have those. Your 2-mile tracks, and then your super speedways, Daytona and Talladega, and of course the road courses. But McLaughlin also mentions he's not a big fan of the road course at Daytona, which and he mentions how maybe NASCAR only needs to have 1 day at Daytona. Well, I would have been saying no to this if for the Daytona 500 to begin the season, and then they have July 4th weekend there. Yeah, if he were to say that now, I'm like, absolutely not. Those are both, obviously, the Daytona 500 is the Daytona 500. I don't think you're obviously going to get rid of that, but if it was in July, but now it's, the last race prior to the playoffs. So, I mean, if they were to say, the one thought I had is, okay, Talladega and Daytona we each go there twice a year for the Cup Series. If you were to alternate it, whether it be every other year or every 2 years, Daytona, obviously the 500 is not getting touched. Talladega is getting a race, but you make a third one and you alternate which track gets the race, because there seems to be some concerns about the racing at the restrictor plates lately. So not personally a fan of that, but if that's the way they go, I'd be like, okay. That would definitely cause those tickets to skyrocket and to sell. So let's see what else he has on here. He's on the fence about Charlotte. Obviously, I don't think the 600 is going anywhere, but with the Roval, that seems to have mixed results. And then if you say go away from the Roval, do you give them another oval race, which, as much history as Charlotte has, it is where the teams are from in large part. Obviously, you keep the 600. But depending on, I'm willing to stay on the Roval for now. That's that's a relatively new experiment for NASCAR. But if you decide that's not really that worthy 3 or 4 years down the road, then Charlotte can be one race. Pocono this year, considering I'm Pennsylvania native, Pocono is having a back-to-back weekend. So all weekend, the Cup Series is racing for a doubleheader, and then one of the days is the Truck Series, and then the other day is the Xfinity Series. So while I like the idea, I think a lot of people will agree in large part. I see Philip's on here. I'm sure Philip would agree because I have talked to him about this. And Pocono, I don't think needs 2 races on the schedule. Am I necessarily opposed to this doubleheader weekend? We'll wait and see. But if Pocono were to say, let's do a doubleheader weekend, I'd be more opposed. I misspoke there. I wouldn't be opposed to that. But prior on the schedule, they'd be back there in like a month and a half in between their 2 races. And I'm just like, it doesn't do much for me. Granted, it's probably the shortest drive to get to a NASCAR race around here, but Pocono is not on the top of my schedule. Now, if somebody, like I said, somebody gave me free tickets, okay, I'll make the 3 or 4 hour trip. But let's see. Yeah, as I mentioned about New Hampshire, I don't want to see New Hampshire go, but that is McLaughlin's plan. And he mentions about the Carmel with North Wilkesboro potentially. Texas Motor Speedway is another 1.5 mile track, just over 20 years old. One of the tracks I mentioned that has been built in the mid to late 90s. And McLaughlin mentions, do they want to host the All-Star race or do they want to have a points race? I think in large part, you ask a lot of NASCAR fans, they say Texas needs only 1 date. From what I've been hearing, not that great a racing. And I think if any tracks are going to be getting the boot from 2 races to 1, it's going to be a lot of 1.5 miles. And I don't think we're going to see much argument amongst the NASCAR community. And of course, he finishes his article with, and this makes sense because this is my view as well. He says, and I'm quoting him exactly from the article, let's talk about race start times a bit. With the exception of tracks in the western time zones and even the mountains, all cup races shall start at or before 1 p.m. And he mentions, like God and ESPN originally intended. And obviously your night races, if you're going to have night races, obviously those are at night. I'm thinking 7, 8 p.m. 7 sounds good for me. And that's the frustrating thing for me because, being that I'm on a 4 to midnight schedule at work, I hardly see racing because they're not started. The pre-race is on at like 2. 1:30, 2 o'clock. And then by the time they're getting racing, I'm getting ready to go to work a lot of times. But if you started at, say, whether it be noon or 1 o'clock, I'm not going to complain. Yeah, I'm not going to see the end of the race, but at least I'm going to see something. And obviously, I think that has something to do with Fox potentially or whatever, but this is what the NASCAR fans want. So I want to see it. I think a lot of people want to see it. The potential new TV contract, hopefully that's something that we can get because it's on the top of our wishing list. But yeah, and then what else to kind of parallel on this? The Nashville Fairgrounds are getting a lot of press for trying to get NASCAR back on their schedule. It was on the Cup Series schedule until the mid 80s, and then from the mid 90s to 2000, it was on the Busch Series schedule. I'm not sure about the Truck Series offhand, but that track, they're trying, the community in large part is trying to get the Nashville Fairgrounds back on NASCAR's schedule somehow. And I'd mention it. It's a little bit of a drive for me, but I'd love to go down to Nashville. I was potentially looking at the Super Speedway there, but when you're talking about the Nashville Fairgrounds, you're talking about the short track. And there's always been resistance to the fairgrounds coming back. And, there were some video clips about some fans, they're not fans, but they're critical of this idea. And obviously, I'm talking about this on a racing podcast, so I think we all know where I lean towards on the topic. But I know watching some of the clips, they were like, some of them were just downright ridiculous, which I'm going to get to as a history major in college. I'm going to rant a little in a few moments here. But I am not going to dismiss if you don't like an idea. That is your right. If you just say, I don't like this track here in this situation. Cool. If you're giving me valid reasons why, okay, I might not necessarily agree with you because obviously, I'm not saying I'm selfish, but obviously I want it. So I'm not really going to see, but it's like, I might think, okay, you brought up a good idea. Like I know one of the ideas that is frequently brought up as an issue is parking. That's a valid issue. Whether you're against the idea in which you would say, well, then where am I going to be parking on these weekends? If I'm going somewhere and if there's not a lot of parking, obviously the racing fans are going to be taking up a lot of the parking. And if you're a racing fan and you want to go to that race, man, I want to get decent parking to get out of here. You don't want to create an issue. So that we can be like, okay, well, what can we do? What can we do for the people if we do decide to go to Nashville? What can we do to help ease if that's one of their issues? What can we do to ease their anger, so to speak, and prevent anger from racing fans that decide to go to the race? What are some of the other issues that were mentioned? This one I'm going to criticize because this is where I'm going to start my rant. One lady, I'm sure you can find clips of her on YouTube here. I am going to try and look it up here real quick and post it in the comments. Give me a second. Yeah, this lady. Okay, well, there's the Bearer Ford Commissioners, Board of Fair Commissioners meeting from what this was for, but it's 4 hours, almost 4.5 hours. Yeah, I don't think everyone wants to watch that and or search for the point, but this lady was saying that, there's 5 or 6 Formula One tracks in this area. Google would tell you that is not true. Yeah, I'm thinking off the top of my head when this lady mentions it, she's like, there are 5 or 6, because she has an accent. She's like, there are 5 or 6 Formula One tracks in the nearby area. No, there's not. Okay, if you're concerned about having a track near you, fine. I don't have an issue with that. Maybe if you knew there was, obviously this isn't like the fairgrounds have been running all the time, and they're not going to be getting they haven't been getting the big crowds like a NASCAR race would bring. I know it's a very popular track, but I would think NASCAR race of some sort would bring in an influx of fans. But if you knew about that track, why would you move here? And then please, if you're going to be at a board meeting or whatever the setting may be, Google, Bing, heck, I know Wikipedia is not you can't exactly always use Wikipedia for everything, but odds are pretty good if you want to look at racetracks in Tennessee. You're going to see there's not 5 or 6 Formula One tracks there. That bothers me because if I was one of the people on the board or whatever, and I'm thinking, I would have done my research and been like, lady says there are 5 or 6 Formula One tracks within the nearby area. I would have been like, okay, yeah, there's probably 5 or 6 racetracks in Tennessee, maybe even in that area. But I hate misquoted information. It's not that hard to do research. Am I expecting people to do, like great amount of research like I have done for history projects or whatever? No, but it's simple. Everyone should be able to go on Google if there's something you care about, get a little bit of research. And because that lady did a lot of harm to that cause. Because guess what? you're giving false information. Do a little bit of research, give them that. Been like, hey, I'm concerned there's 5 or 6 racetracks within an hour, hour and a half. Okay, that's, I mean, a valid concern. But seriously, do some research. I'm overemphasizing it, but it bothers me. Because if I didn't do my research on certain history projects, if I didn't do that on my senior thesis, what am I getting? We'll see you next spring when you retake this course. I hold myself to a very high standard. Yeah, I might mix some things up here or there, but obviously, just do your research. I'm gonna end that rant there because I can go on and on and on, and I'm sure I'm not making sense. I'm probably not being the best that I can when explaining this, but just please do your research. Whether it just be a Google search or something. It's not that hard. It's not rocket science. Don't give misquoted claims and then continue spewing them, as people frequently do, and I frequently call people out on. So, that's that. Just give some final thoughts on the, let me see if I have any comments on the schedule. Well, not comments on the schedule, just comments in general. Hi, Philip. How's it going? I don't know if you're still on here. Just give me a shout out if you still are. Thanks for the encouragement there. Yeah, and speaking of Heidelberg, I forget where I was going. Heidelberg, for those of you who aren't aware, is a track out past Pittsburgh. There's a mile marker or something. If you're heading towards the airport in Pittsburgh, you'll see the marker for Heidelberg. It was a NASCAR track in the early days of NASCAR. So while I don't remember it, I have heard of it, and obviously that's Pittsburgh's, connection to NASCAR. Yeah, that'd be cool to check out. I believe it's a shopping center now. Go figure, as happens oftentimes with tracks when they close, they become shopping centers. But yeah, I might even try and check that out in some part. Maybe do like a video. That is one of my future ideas I have, is to have try and go exploring a little bit at some tracks that are no longer active. Heidelberg might be one. I don't know how exciting it would be considering it's a shopping center, but yeah, it's definitely worth a check out. Oh yeah, Philip, if you're not subscribed yet, I'd appreciate you subscribing to the channel. I believe you're on the Facebook group, so if not, give me a holler and I'll add you. Let me just think. See if there's anything else I want to mention. Yeah, I did come across somebody else's potential idea for a schedule. It's for 2026, but I didn't have time to look at it. Maybe next week I might just create my own schedule and just give you some thoughts and give you a better idea where I want the Cup Series schedule to look like. Like I said, my big thing is I'd like to see the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series go to some of these short tracks. Because I'm sure if the Cup Series is not getting full capacity for the Premier Series, Xfinity and the trucks aren't getting even that much. I was debating on going to Richmond this year, which was a combination of the Wheeling Modifieds, the Xfinity Series, and the Cup Series. If I'm going to a race sometime in the near future, I at least want to get 2 series, if not all 3. And I would be going to all 3. And obviously I'd be able to get some factual information, just be like, hey, in this case, I went to this track. Nope, not really anyone showed up. But I think if the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series would return to some more short tracks, it would help them, especially if you go to ones that used to be on the schedule, like I mentioned, from the late 90s to 2000. Some of them are closed. Nazareth's been closed. Myrtle Beach just closed last year. But that's one big thing I want to see. But yeah, I think that's it. My opinion, wasn't as good as last week, but like I said, I do like this idea of you not seeing me, and I'm sure you guys like not seeing me either. Ha ha ha. Self-deprecating. Deprecating humor is a good thing. So, yeah, it didn't flow as well. I was trying to get this done really quick, and like I said, it's the 4th episode, so you're still in the new stages of the podcast, but you're always going to get better. So, yeah, real quick before I finish up, see if I can get this to an hour. I'm showing 51 minutes, just over. Let's talk about this day in racing history, and I will be going into yesterday in racing history as well. Today in racing history, back on May 13th, 1916, at the Sheepshead Bay Raceway in Sheepshead Bay, New York, Eddie Rickenbacker won a AAA Champ Car Series race. It was the 1916 Metropolitan Trophy race. You might have heard of Eddie Rickenbacker. Let's see. He's quoted. Well, he's profiled in the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame Museum. Got started racing in the. Got a job in an automobile factory in Columbus, Ohio, in 1906, and started racing competitively after that. And this even led to starts in early editions of the Indianapolis 500. See if I get anything on top of my head. Yeah, he entered his first Indy 500 in 1911. Finished 11th. He was a co-driver on that team. He was running 4th the following year in 1912, and he lost his engine. So, yeah. Coming up to this point in the 1910s, Rickenbacker was known as a racer, and he won his fair share of races. But then if you're history, buff, or World War I history buff, Eddie Rickenbacker as an fighter pilot who became an ace for shot down 22 enemy planes and 4 observation balloons, according to the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame and Museum. So when I first heard of Eddie Rickenbacker, obviously I know him as a fighter pilot, flying ace, also a racing driver. So I didn't learn that until just recently, probably 2019, 2020. So one good thing about history is you're always learning things, even if you studied it like I did and am continuing to study it, and or starting a podcast on racing history in part. But yeah, that's today. So going back to the field in 1916, 75 lap race. It was a 10-car field. And yeah, Rickenbacker didn't lead early on, but he led the last 17 that counted. So yeah, so Eddie Rickenbacker, both a race car driver and a World War I veteran. Hopefully I didn't say World War II, I just had that thought, because I do my fair share of World War II history reading, but hopefully I didn't say World War II here. As far as yesterday, and some more continuation of today in NASCAR racing history, 21 years ago yesterday, Adam Petty, 4th generation Petty, NASCAR's royal family, so to speak, was killed in a practice crash um, at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Um, don't like to bring up, tragic events as I have before in part, but it's still important to mention. I think with Adam Petty, he was, I don't think he was quite 20 years old. He was 19 years old, so he was a young up and comer, obviously driving for his family team with Petty Enterprises. And the question is often asked, this is one of those notorious questions of NASCAR's: what would have happened had he not been killed at New Hampshire? Just a month prior, he made his only Cup Series start at Texas. So, and the plan was for him to shortly there be racing in the Cup Series, maybe in a couple years. And what we know about Petty Enterprises is, they were later bought out, and so the team didn't last that much longer post Adam Petty. But if Adam Petty had lived, how would that, of course, have changed? And I wonder how successful would he have been under Petty Enterprises? And would he have, he would have been he would have been just over 40 now. So would he still be racing? Would he have gotten a decent opportunity if Petty Enterprises didn't work out? Because I wonder with Petty Enterprises, even if Adam Petty was racing, would he have been able to been successful for that, or would he have gotten opportunities otherwise? My one memory of him, I do remember when I first heard about him being killed at the practice during the practice at New Hampshire, but I remember him winning, like his father, Kyle. He won his first ARCA race. Kyle won his first ARCA race at Daytona. Adam won his at Charlotte, and I was, visiting my grandparents, and we were watching it. And I believe it was back on TNN, and I remember watching that and was like, cool, this is Petty, So, and I was a little bit of a Adam Petty fan, for that short time period, and like I said, that it took me kind of hard because that was like the first time I ever heard of a driver passing away due to a racing crash. So as an 8-year-old, that hits you kind of hard. And like I said, he was a driver. If he would have gotten the Cup Series full time, I would probably have been rooting for him alongside Jeff Gordon. So I feel it's important to still mention these drivers. Obviously, I don't think Adam Petty's name is ever going to, be erased from history, so to speak. His legacy still continues with the Victory Junction Gang, which was a vision he had. He wanted to help various people, and that's what that camp does to this day. So his legacy will continue to live on, and obviously NASCAR fans are always going to be talking about the Pettys. And it just so happens, I came across a piece of Adam Petty racing memorabilia. And like I said, was a fan of his growing up for that short time frame. So brace yourselves, you're going to see my face. Hardy har har. This came up on Pristine Auction. Trying to figure this out. Darn light, but it's actually autoed here. It's PSA, JSA certified, so it is legit. This is something you don't come across often. So I'm like, when I saw it, I'm like, you know what? For that short time period, definitely wanted to see Adam Petty succeed, and you don't see that memorabilia too often. So I'm like, I think I'll add this to my collection. So just figures, I mean, all these years later, and it's something pops up like that. And like I said, it's something I definitely want to, I'm glad to have it in my collection and glad I came across it. So, let's see if we have any more comments. Oh, just hit the hour mark. Cool. Yeah, I did get asked, Zach, what are you reading? Or what do you have planned on reading? Brace yourselves, my face is coming back again. Voices from the Rust Belt, Belt Publishing. I'm near Pittsburgh, so, and obviously I have a lot of history reading material, so I'm into like Rust Belt history now. So that's what I'm reading now. As you can see my bookmark there. I haven't read this book in like a week, but hopefully I can get to it on my day off today. And in the pipeline, I can't decide if I want to read Friday Night Lights Companion, the TV show, future Rabbit Slinger Media idea. And then, for the racing fans out there, Octane Press just came out with a book, Indy Splits, the big money battle that nearly destroyed Indy racing. Battle between IndyCar racing and Champ Car racing. This spans multiple decades. You can get it on Octane Press or one of my favorite sites, coastal181.com. So, yeah, this is going to be read in the nearby future. Pretty decent sized book. Might even be able to cause some damage if you want to hit a coworker over the head with it. Hardy hard. But, yeah, I say bye-bye my ugly face. Yeah. But, yeah, I think that's it for now. What is it? Tonight is the first race of the Blur Dirt Series 305 Sprint Car Series, so it's probably what I'm going to be working on here afterwards. Got to do a new paint scheme. See how the season goes. So I'll be doing that later tonight. Working on many other things that I swear I don't have enough time for, though I will find a way to make them work. But obviously, of course, I'm just going to finish up here. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. I have my Facebook group linked down below. Please ask to join that. Please share this video however you can. If you have any ideas, thoughts, ideas for the channel or what you'd like me to do, please feel free to share your thoughts, whether on a comment here on the Facebook group somehow. I'm not opposed to hearing any ideas. So also give a look down low to some guys that support the channel. Joe at Bavinok Gaming. Bob with GoBobby. So if you need a website, web domain, Bob's your guy. And I just remembered now that I forgot to mention about Junior Motorsports. But hey, there's always next week. I want to see some guys starting to comment, just giving their thoughts, so I can incorporate you guys into the program, into the podcast. So for a thing into next week, give me your thoughts, however you can get a hold of me. What do you think about Junior Motorsports going cup racing in the nearby future? Because Junior has been on record saying it's now or never. And I'll leave you with my thought of, what do you think of the idea of him taking over Hendrick Motorsports when Rick Hendrick decides to retire? Now, I'll give you, also it has been mentioned that Jeff Gordon is probably in line to take over for Rick Hendrick when he decides to retire. But rather than Dale Jr. starting a new cup team, if it's possible, why can't he take over for Rick Hendrick? Hendrick Motorsports and JR Motorsports have already consolidated their teams in the Xfinity Series. That's a combination of Hendrick and JR Motorsports. So do you think that's possible? He takes over for Rick Hendrick, or does he start new with the JR Motorsports by expanding them in the Cup Series? Give me your thoughts on that. I will mention that next week and see what else I can get into. And yes, the 1992 season, still have that on the back burner, but hopefully sooner rather than later, I will get that to you. So at least here, it looks like we have some decent weather, so I'm going to try and enjoy it on my day off. Have a good afternoon, guys, and thank you for watching/listening.